They said the desert kept its secrets, but some it hung out for all to see. On a lonely mesa, beneath a twisted juniper, a young Apache girl dangled upside down. Her wrists raw, her face swollen, blood dripping the wrong way across her brow. Above her head, a wooden sign swung in the wind, scrawled in dirt and blood, "White man never shows mercy." Each heartbeat pounded heavier, the blood rushing to her skull, suffocating her slowly. She twisted, gasping, her eyes rolling back, until at last they caught sight of him. Elias, a rancher with no kin, no friends, just silence. His hand froze on the knife at his belt. To cut her down meant war. To walk away meant letting her die. So tell me, when the West itself dares you to show mercy, do you walk away? Or do you take the rope in your hand, knowing every rider in the desert will soon come hunting? The desert did not whisper that night. It screamed. Wind dragged dust across the lonely mesa, clawing at a man's boots as he rode slow toward home. Elias was his name, a rancher with no kin, just cattle and silence. But what he saw stopped the blood in his veins cold. There, strung upside down from a gnarled juniper tree, hung a girl, young, Apache. Her dark hair fell like a curtain toward the sand. Her wrists lashed tight with rawhide, ankles burning from the rope that cut into skin. The cruelest part wasn't the way her body swung in the wind. It was the sign nailed above her head. Painted in angry strokes, smeared with blood and dirt, it read, "White man never shows mercy." Her face was swollen, lips cracked. Blood trickled from her nose down to her forehead, reversing the path it should have taken. Her eyes, barely open, rolled back, fighting against the suffocating pull of blood rushing to her skull. Elias dismounted. His spurs hit the earth, a metallic echo swallowed by the emptiness. Every instinct told him to leave. This was a warning, a trap laid by men who wanted vengeance. Cutting her down could mean death for him. But then the girl groaned, a sound so broken it clawed at the marrow of his bones. She was suffocating slowly, every heartbeat pounding heavier than the last. He stood there, torn between fear and humanity. His hand hovered over the hunting knife strapped to his thigh. The sign above her mocked him, daring him to do it. His breath grew ragged. "If I free her, the riders will come for me. If I don't..." He looked again. Her eyes, cloudy with pain, flicked open just enough to meet his. Not begging, not cursing, just holding him. He slashed the rope. The body hit the dirt with a sickening thud. She coughed, heaved, clawing at air that finally rushed back into her lungs. Elias crouched down, lifting her head gently. She was barely conscious, her pulse fluttering against his calloused fingers. Somewhere out in the desert, a coyote howled. Echoes carried. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was heavy. He knew eyes might be watching from the ridges, waiting to see if the sign's prophecy would be broken. Elias threw his coat over her trembling frame and whispered to the night, "Mercy's all I got left." But even mercy has a price. And in the West, every debt came due. The girl was light as kindling in his arms, but Elias felt her weight in his chest. He draped her across the saddle, mounted behind, and urged the horse into a careful trot. The desert stretched wide, each hoofbeat echoing like a drumbeat of guilt. Her skin burned with fever where it touched his arm, sweat dampening his sleeve. His ranch sat tucked in a hollow, miles from the nearest trail. A lonely house of weathered pine and stone, it was a place built for silence, not guests. He carried her inside, laying her on his bed, the only softness for miles. By lantern light, the damage showed clear. Bruises mottled her ribs, rope burns carved into her wrists and ankles, lips cracked to bleeding. She stirred, flinching at his touch. "I ain't here to hurt you," Elias said low, though he doubted she understood. Her eyes opened enough to study him. Hazel green like the desert cactus flower after rain, sharp even through pain. Then she turned her face away. He fetched water, washed the blood from her brow, bound her wrists with strips of cloth. Each touch felt like trespass. He had no right to her trust. But he worked anyway. When she finally slept, her breaths shallow but steady, Elias sat at the table, staring at the dead fire in the hearth. On the ridges above his land, he'd seen shadows earlier, riders. He could feel their presence even now. Men who had left her hanging might return for the man fool enough to cut her down. His Winchester leaned by the door, but the truth was colder than steel. He was one man against many. Morning broke harsh and red, spilling through the shutters. She woke with a start, bolting upright, her voice sharp in Apache tongue. Elias raised both hands slow. "Easy! Easy, girl!" She scanned the room, saw no rope, no sign, only a stranger's coat across her shoulders. Confusion softened her glare, but not much. He tried words. She answered with silence. Yet silence wasn't empty. It was charged like the desert air before a storm. She watched him chop wood, watched him tend the horse, watched him sweep dust from the floor. Always wary, always measuring. By sundown, she sat wrapped in a blanket by the fire. Her eyes followed his every move. He wondered if she saw a captor or a savior. He wondered if mercy had been kindness, or a mistake already circling back. Nights on the ranch were colder than most men expected. The desert sky looked vast and endless, stars sharp as cut glass, and the silence pressed heavy against the walls. Elias stirred the fire, tossing in dry mesquite branches. The girl sat wrapped in wool, her face glowing in the flicker, eyes fixed not on him but on the flames. Days had passed since he cut her down. She spoke little, mostly whispers in Apache too quiet for him to catch. Yet something shifted in the rhythm of their living. She began to move about the ranch, limping at first, then stronger. She carried water in a tin pail. She mended a loose strap on his saddle without being asked. When Elias returned from the corral one morning, he found the floor swept clean, the blanket folded neatly on the bed. They never named what bound them, but small kindnesses stacked like stones on a wall. He caught her watching him patch a fence, her gaze soft with something more than suspicion. At night, he pretended to sleep while her breathing steadied near the fire. Once, he heard her whisper, half prayer, half curse, before silence reclaimed her. But peace was thin here, stretched tight as rawhide. One evening, while Elias brushed down his horse, he spotted dust rising on the horizon. Riders, maybe 3, maybe more, their silhouettes black against the sinking sun. His hand tightened on the brush. He did not call her name, though by now he knew it. He'd overheard her murmur it in her sleep. Nayeli. He walked inside, his boots heavy with dread. She was sitting at the table, stitching cloth with borrowed thread. When their eyes met, she seemed to already know. Her jaw set, hands steady, though her breath caught sharp. "Men are coming," Elias said. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached for the blanket folded on the chair, pulling it around her shoulders. That gesture, quiet, calm, almost resigned, cut deeper than words. Elias set his rifle on the table. His heart pounded with the weight of what was coming. He'd given her shelter, given her mercy. But mercy painted a target on his back. Out here in the Wild West, every act of kindness carried a shadow. Elias had given shelter, but shelter could turn into a noose at any moment. If this story grips your heart the way the desert grips its secrets, don't ride past it. Make sure to subscribe and stay with us, because the next twist may change everything. He knelt by the fire, adding wood, sparks snapping loud in the silence. Outside, the hoofbeats grew nearer. He looked at Nayeli once more, her eyes fierce beneath the shadows. In the Wild West, mercy didn't just cost. It hunted you down. The sound came first, hoofbeats like war drums rolling across the desert floor. Then the glow. Torches flared against the night, weaving between mesquite and stone. Elias doused the lamp, leaving only the fire's dim breath in the hearth. The girl, Nayeli, stood frozen, her blanket clutched tight, eyes reflecting the flames like a cornered doe. He pressed a finger to his lips, then moved to the window. Shapes emerged in the dark. 4 riders, maybe more circling unseen. Their voices carried, rough and eager, calling threats Elias couldn't mistake. They knew she lived. They knew he'd broken the warning nailed to that tree. The door rattled as a boot slammed against it. Elias raised his rifle, but he knew he couldn't hold a siege. "Not alone, not here," He glanced at Nayeli, her face pale, lips trembling, though her eyes burned defiant. "Back door," he whispered. She hesitated, then nodded. They slipped into the night, crouching low as the storm of voices swelled behind them. Torches lit the cabin walls, shadows stretching monstrous. Elias led her toward the canyon's mouth, where black cliffs swallowed the stars. Rain began to spit from a bruised sky, thunder grumbling deep in the belly of the clouds. The ground turned slick beneath their boots. Nayeli stumbled, falling to her knees. Elias pulled her up, his grip strong but steady. A shout cracked through the dark. One rider had spotted them. A gunshot split the night, the bullet whining off stone. They ran, hearts pounding with the storm itself. Lightning carved jagged scars across the cliffs, illuminating the path ahead, a narrow trail twisting into the Badlands. Elias shoved her forward, covering her with his body as another shot rang out. The canyon swallowed them whole. Walls rose high on both sides, funneling rain into rivulets that snaked at their feet. Nayeli gasped for breath, her hand clutching his sleeve as though it were the only thread holding her upright. Behind, the riders pressed closer, their shouts echoing like wolves closing on prey. Elias stopped at a fork, left path narrow and treacherous, right path wide but exposed. His breath caught in his throat. One way leads to life, the other to death. He looked at her, at the fire still burning in her eyes despite fear, despite pain. The storm cracked above them, drowning his thoughts. He made his choice and prayed it was the right one. Dawn crept slow, bleeding pale gold into the canyon. Smoke still curled from gun barrels, the acrid sting of powder clinging to the air. Elias sat slumped against the rock, chest heaving, his rifle lying empty across his knees. Beside him, Nayeli crouched low, her hands trembling as she pressed a torn strip of cloth against his shoulder. Blood seeped warm, staining her fingers, but her eyes never left his face. They had made their stand when the path narrowed. Elias had fired until every chamber clicked hollow. 2 riders fell, their bodies swallowed by the storm-slicked gulch. The rest scattered, unwilling to chase deeper into the maze of stone where ambushes and echoes waited. But the price had been steep. Elias bore it now in crimson silence. He lifted his gaze toward the horizon. Sunlight touched the cliffs, painting them the color of fire. "Mercy!" His voice rasped, raw as gravel. It always costs. Nayeli's lips parted, as though words balanced on the edge, ready to fall. For the first time, she spoke in halting English. "You did not leave me." Her words struck harder than any bullet. He managed a faint smile, though pain twisted it. Couldn't, wouldn't. They sat there, the storm drifting off into memory, the canyon alive only with the call of ravens. She tightened the bandage with gentle hands, her movements more promise than gesture. Something unspoken passed between them, an oath neither had strength to voice. By the time Elias staggered to his feet, leaning heavy on the rock, the riders were gone. Only hoofprints and blood marked the earth. He looked at Nayeli, her face streaked with dust, hair tangled, but her eyes burning with life. "From here," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "everything changes." The girl nodded, solemn, as if she already knew. They walked back toward the ranch in silence, steps slow but sure. Behind them, the canyon kept its secrets. Before them, the desert stretched wide, harsh, and endless. Yet between them lay something fragile and unbreakable, a bond born not of words, but of choice. As the sun climbed higher, Elias felt the weight of the sign he'd torn down days before. "White man never shows mercy." The words had been meant as a curse. But he had proven them wrong, and in doing so, carved a path he could never turn back from. Mercy had found him, and mercy demanded a price he was willing to pay. Mercy had cost Elias blood, but it had also lit a fire that no storm could put out. If this tale of survival and sacrifice stirred something in you, don't let it vanish with the desert wind. Like this video, subscribe, and ring the bell, because in the Wild West, love and mercy are rarer than water. Yet they always find a way.